Okay. So I don't know if you can see the link to the agenda. I'll put it in the chat again for the people who just came in. Okay, so first of all, does anyone have anything they want to mention, talk about before we start? It's just a quick thing. How do you feel about the final document? Did everyone read that over? Do they have any comments about it? Like anything that you might want to bring up, or that we should, any ideas for things we should pursue in the next month outside of the immediate agenda?
You mean the initiative overview document, right?
Yeah, the initiative overview.
Yeah, no, I think it looks good.
Okay.
And I do have something for the agenda because I don't see anything about the. Sorry,
okay.
There are so many.
Oh well, just add it in where you want to add it in.
Yeah, I thought for the community survey, which we will develop for September, I think that's something to talk about as well.
Yeah, we'll talk about, because we kind of have to get that going.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't see it on the agenda, right?
Yeah, we didn't. I mean, Bhavik just brought up a couple points, and I put them in the agenda. So.
Morning, everyone. I just realized that I was talking and my computer was muted, and I was like, "Oh, sorry about that." But about the community survey, essentially, that was one of the blog post entries that I kind of wanted to bring up a little bit later in the meeting, because before we start the actual survey, we probably want to write up a blog post, giving an outline of sort of the information that we expect and the participants that we would hope would take the survey. And so that was kind of one of the things on the agenda, to sort of advertise it and bring it up in that fashion. But certainly there could be other avenues of bringing it up.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. We can start with that if you want, the community survey. So I noticed that people have started, I think they give surveys a lot in the eLife Ambassadors program. In fact, I think Sarvi has some experience with that as well, in terms of administrating surveys within the Ambassadors program. So we might want to tap her expertise on that.
Yeah.
To see if she has any ideas about it.
That's our new member, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she's been in the program. She's in the program, like, I think last year. And she's been in a couple of different initiatives. So.
Okay, cool.
And so I see that they advertise them on a regular basis. So people are always taking surveys in the ambassadors program. So it's kind of a thing that you do as an ambassador. So I guess the first thing we should talk about, is survey design. So I assume Marije has some experience with survey design.
Not particularly.
Oh, okay.
I guess not in a formal capacity. I did design a few simple surveys, but depending on what we need.
Well, I guess my take on it is we should just kind of come up with some questions or some things we want to ask people.
Yeah.
Just first to have like a little draft, maybe a Google Doc where we put down things that are, what is it that's most essential to find out. And I'm not sure if people have done this in other places. So I don't know. Maybe that's something. Well, I don't know if we could ask Cora. She probably wouldn't know, but I don't know. There might be like some things online too where people have asked questions about it, or there might be some themes that we want to get things that people can actually answer instead of just some open-ended thing where it's people don't know how to answer the question properly.
Yeah, I think it's like usually you want to limit to quantifiable points like this.
Yeah, I think sorry. I think the difficulty with only letting people check boxes is that we may miss things. It's so interdisciplinary. So, for instance, in my field, I would expect people, like common data structures to have like gender of the participant, nationality, ethnicity, stuff like that. What is in all the demographic variables questionnaires. But if you're, for instance, studying fungi, that's completely different. So I'm not sure whether we can fill this in.
Yeah, we have to think about look at the specific questions, because we want to in the situations that we can make the multiple choices, we do that as much as possible, or with how you feel about certain things, or you can do a sliding bar with the 5 grades, right? And then of course there are questions we have to give them free answers.
Yeah.
We try to simplify the question as clear as possible. I think it's a good idea that we start with a Google Doc or something.
Yeah. And we can then aggregate answers probably. If you make some structured questions and some open-ended.
Yeah, definitely.
Do we have a short because we want everyone to fill it out, right?
Do we have a platform preferred platform to do that from eLife, or are we just using anything we have?
I think they might have a preferred platform. Because when I see them, they seem to be in the same format. So they have formats online, but it's they might have a preferred one they want us to use, because then we'll have a database of the answers. So
I forgot her name, but our new member knows if she has some experience with this.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah. What's her name again, Bradley?
Sarvi.
Sarvi.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can actually.
So we can maybe pick her brain about this.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I can actually. I can ping her and see if she's I can just ask her if she has some good tips for doing this. So before we start. And then I guess the idea would be just to come up with some questions, maybe things that we all want, maybe that you want to know more directly, and then what things maybe more generally, maybe do a little research about maybe something that you think is a topic to ask about, and then see what maybe some common themes are, or maybe find a survey online where people have done this already, and then I don't know if that exists, but there might be things then we want to assemble all the questions and then run through it a couple times internally in the group. So that makes sense. And,
maybe should we also start do you guys use Mendeley or Zotero, the literature collection?
Yeah.
Look at what's already out there. I think there are some survey results already published, not necessarily on data, maybe even on data reviews. But if you can start a group, and then we can all put in the literature we find.
Yeah,
I can do that. If do you what do you guys prefer?
Yeah, that would be great.
I use both.
Or is it
I use EndNote. But
EndNote. Oh,
it doesn't
anymore. I don't have that anymore.
What do you use, Bhavik?
I use PaperPile, but on the other hand, I'm open to using other platforms. So, I'm agnostic. Either Mendeley or Zotero should work fine.
Yeah, if it's web-based, then you can.
Yeah. I think Zotero is pretty straightforward, and it's open source, I think.
Yeah. Well, I'm open to trying something new because I don't really particularly like EndNote. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we could have a meeting on that. all the complaints that you have off EndNote.
I'll start that.
Okay. And I think it's pretty low. It's a low barrier to entry. You can just learn it pretty much in an
It's
afternoon.
very,
or something.
Yeah.
It's very easy.
So then we'll do that. Then we'll get the Google Doc. Does someone want to take responsibility for the Google Doc, like assembling the?
Yeah, I would want to do that.
Okay.
Try and set it up.
Okay.
Yeah, cool.
I think there are of course some common data structures already, but this is so broad that I think it's more broad than what is there.
Okay.
So, but we can take a look.
Yeah, I think we just at this point we just need like something simple so we can like get a sort of a handle on how we want to set it up, and then we can talk about it on discourse or in a meeting, like how we're gonna really refine it and get the sort of structure questions that we want. And
yeah, maybe we can also pilot it a bit.
Yeah, I think we
I'll ask 2 colleagues or something to fill it out, and then
That's a good idea. That's a really good idea.
Yeah.
because are we all from different fields? I'm from psychology, which is really actually outside eLife.
Okay. I'm a cell biology.
Yeah, okay, different.
I mean, cell biology originally, but I'm a librarian now.
Yeah.
Biomedical engineering.
Okay. Yeah.
computational biology.
Oh, that's nice.
That's great. Yeah.
Good.
So
Okay.
well, that's good. I think.
Bhavik, you said that maybe we should, before we send out the survey, we should write a blog post.
Right. So one of the details, this could be just my bias here, but one of the details is providing some background, some context to the survey that is being offered. And to that end, what I was wondering is if we could detail some of the challenges that various fields are facing. We could have just a couple of examples in there about data standardization, reporting standards, and so on and so forth, before saying, so well, here is a problem statement, and so we are trying to explore the solution space here, and therefore we would really appreciate if people could go ahead and take this survey. So while there's some survey design going on, there might be some value in sort of providing some context for the survey being offered.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that you think other people might find useful before taking the survey, or?
Yeah, I think that would be valuable just to make our goal of the survey more clear.
Yeah.
That's without overwhelming people like on the intro page of the survey, right?
Yeah. I wonder whether it could also are there surveys normally introduced by, for instance, Cora? I mean, if it could go out as an email to everybody, then it may not be such a problem if the intro is done in the email instead of in the intro page. Because I wonder whether everybody will read the blog post.
Not necessarily. Yeah, right.
And also, the blog post isn't more useful with results in it.
Oh, you mean with survey results? The blog post?
Yeah.
I think we can publish a pre and a post survey.
I think that's a great idea. Doing both pre and post sort of as a follow-up, saying, hey, here's what we said, whatever, a couple months ago, 3 months ago, that these are the things that we are interested in. We conducted a survey, and then here is what the community thinks about the various priorities that one ought to be setting for themselves, and that could be like a follow-up post.
Yeah.
I think the advantage of having a pre-post is like people have like sort of, if they have read it, then they feel like, oh, I read it somewhere else, this is sort of important, then they're more likely to click on the survey, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Otherwise it's something brand new. And,
But do you then propose the ECR blog?
Yeah.
Because I was just wondering how often it appears. Because if if it's only once a month, for example, or once every 2 weeks, there may be too many topics for us. So we may have to be last in line, and then we'll appear in December. I don't know. I was just wondering whether.
I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bradley, but during the quarterly update, I think Devang mentioned that there were like 4 blogs in the pipeline, and he publishes about 3 to 4 a month. So we might be looking at like a month's delay between when we submit it and when it goes out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's
I think something like that was mentioned. And just a quick note, Sarvi, I think, did a survey recently, and one of the things that happened was, maybe I shouldn't be speaking for her, but one of the things that happened is she asked some of the ambassadors to send a blast out to their institutes, so, encouraging people to take the survey and so on. And then the good news was that she had a very detailed sort of email explaining all the motivations behind the survey and so on. And at that point, whether I forward the email or forward a link to a blog post, it seemed effectively to be serving the same purpose. So providing context before the survey is clicked through. So I think there's a little bit of precedent, although I'm extrapolating from n = 1, which is never a good idea, but still.
Okay. So at least we have to write some context, whether it's a blog post or an email.
Right.
The difference, of course, is that a blog post could also be a blog post remains out there, of course, which is fine. But we might be able to extend it with the results then later on.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and one of the other things is if we plan out the appropriate media blasts, different ambassadors putting it out on social media in a staggered manner, not all on the same the first day, then we could try and get in front of people who kind of missed it because they were on vacation or whatnot. Different people putting it out on social media time and time again, and sort of the blog post just stays there, so we don't have to work through rephrasing, etc.
It gets on the discourse page as well.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so blog post it is then.
Good.
Yeah, so I guess we can work on that. Like once we have, we can work on that once we have some idea what goes in the survey, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Survey design, I think, is the first thing.
Yeah. Yeah, some background can already be in there about data pooling and how difficult it is when everybody uses different data structures.
Sure. Yeah. Good.
Okay.
So then actually maybe we'll move up the proposed blog post up to the second point. Since we're already talking about blog posts.
Find back the agenda. Okay, yeah, here.
And so this is just briefly discuss the proposed blog post. So we were talking about a blog post for the survey, but this is also there's a blog post mentioned in the document. And so I was actually thinking maybe we want to have an introductory shorter post to announce the initiative, just like a very short one that kind of spells out kind of what we want to do very, very briefly, instead of having the long form document and then putting it up at eLife, and then having the one for the survey, and then we have to start planning for the one that's mentioned in the document, which is I guess in December. Now, Bhavik proposed that we do it that way. What was your thinking on the main blog post?
So the idea really was threefold. One is the introductory blog post that introduces the survey. The second is the follow-on to sort of report the results from the survey, and then in a very, very biased perspective on the topic, presumably there will be some feedback about sort of the best approach to gathering community feedback in terms of data standardization and so on. But that's just suggestions on the platform and the way to collect feedback. We then have to go in and actually collect that feedback in a presumably field specific manner. And so then the big December blog post, the highlight of the blogging efforts from the initiative, presumably, is this slightly longer one that provides links to at least a handful of different fields and sort of the feedback mechanism, and then that presumably cannot be rushed, and so therefore the follow-on blog post to that, sort of taking feedback from stakeholders from the community, will be sort of towards the end of the year, next June or something, where you're like, okay, this is the sort of feedback we got from, I don't know, for example, cell biology, for example, from psychology and so on. And so that's the result. But the December one is kind of the big one where we actually introduce it. And that really is one where we want the maximum participation from that point forward.
Okay. Well, that sounds good.
Do you guys think I'm suggesting a bigger bite than we can manage to chew? Is that
ambitious, I think. Maybe December may be a bit too soon. If we, because we have to develop the survey, then people need time to take the survey, and we need to analyze the results and come up with different formats for different fields. Right? So maybe December is a bit too soon.
Right. So there are two.
It doesn't really matter. Maybe we can always postpone it to March or something.
So there are really two questions. One is the wisdom of the workflow itself, and then the second one is, like you suggested, the timeline, and maybe December is too ambitious, and maybe we can slow it down a little. But do you think in terms of the workflow, those should be the steps that might be the most informative? Or
I think that's possible. Yeah, I like it. What do you think?
I'm biased. I like it. That's why I proposed it in that manner, right? What do the other two folks feel about it?
Workflow is important.
Workflow seems okay, but I see implicit resistance to the timeline. It seems like it's an ambitious timeline.
Well, isn't that contingent on like our survey? So we have to get the feedback from people. And it's like, I don't know how long that'll take, but it'll probably depend on the survey design and implementing that. I mean, there might be a couple of moving parts there that might push it back. I mean, I like the idea of having it in that order, but, what's our timeline for getting there internally to that post? Like, how are we going to get the piece that, the feedback, and how are we going to assemble the feedback? Into something.
Right. All right. So
very good sense of like what the timeline, how much we can achieve, and we have how many months from this. We have like 5 months or something, right?
Until December.
So we need maybe 1 month to design the survey and test it out. That's pretty ambitious, I think. And then we will deliver it for a month. Then that will be September. Yeah, maybe it's doable.
Right. Worst case scenario, I think the piece of the puzzle that, again, in my biased view, requires the longest amount of time is the second level feedback, when we ask in a topic-specific manner for feedback from stakeholders. That might be the longest piece. And again, in my biased perspective, I think that one requires at least 6 months of open survey, where people can provide all sorts of feedback, because in a field specific manner there might be quite many open-ended questions where people might want to argue about the wisdom of using some standard over some other standard. And so if we miss the December deadline, I mean, that happens. But the follow up to that, I would suggest is no matter when that blog post goes out, we keep that survey open for a minimum of 6 months, and then if that blows through the end of the year deadline for our ambassador program for this year, we can hope that the results are collated by participants next year instead of rushing it and sort of doing a study of garnering feedback on it. So either way, no matter when it goes out, I recommend we give it at least 6 months to collect feedback on that second one.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Then we have to just like advertise diligently during that time.
Yeah,
right. Of course.
Yeah.
And also we can rely on the 200 plus community members that we have to sort of provide staggered advertising on different platforms.
Yeah. Definitely.
Of course, we would need an adequate response rate for the first survey as well, because if we don't achieve what we want to achieve, if we don't get input from many fields, then we need additional time there as well. But we will see when we get there, I guess.
Okay.
I mean, there's another option instead of like having a big end of the. I mean, you can have the end of the program blog post, but to have like maybe to break it up over a series of posts. And that's sort of my experience blogging, that like sometimes if you give it in smaller bites, like if you give maybe little different specialized topics in a series, people are more apt to read at least that part. And because if you put it like you publish it in a 4,000 or 5,000 word tract, people are less likely to go through and read it.
That's a great suggestion. Suggestion. Break it down into several entries on a per field basis. That's a great suggestion. I really like it.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's make a note on that.
Yeah. Make a series every once a month or something.
Yeah. At least that also allow for some interactive feedback, so like people would read it and get in touch with us and say, we have this issue in our group, or whatever, and they might provide some suggestions that we never thought of, because we don't know everyone's issues. Yeah. So I mean that might be good from that standpoint too.
I think it would be wise to include at the end of the survey also a question about if someone would like to participate on behalf of their field, not just provide the info in the survey, but also in the follow-up, maybe play a role.
That sounds fantastic.
Several fields, I guess. Although we are already.
I wonder down the road if we want to consider taking an approach that I don't know if you guys heard of this Ithaca project, where they interview with like researchers about their best practices and what the problems there are. Basically, we schedule interviews following a set of like pre-designed questions and talk to them about an hour or so, I think half an hour to an hour, and then like afterwards I record the thing, and afterwards everything would be transcribed, and then and then compile that into sort of a research output. That's a different, that's a more involved approach than if you can find people who are willing to do this kind of research. That's also valuable, I think, because like usually during the conversation, more issues come out.
Yeah.
We can end with then the survey.
But it does sound like if we want to do that, then it will become a much larger project.
It is. Yeah, it is. Yeah, I'm just putting it out there.
One that we need funds for as well, probably.
Yeah. We need to, we do need the transcription services, I guess, to transcribe all the recordings.
But also the man hours to conduct the interviews.
That's like only if we can find people who are like from the pilots from preliminary survey, if people are interested in get involved and to go out and interview their colleagues and those, that will work. But that's for the future. I'm just putting it out there.
It's definitely interesting.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good, and then another thing too is I don't know if we want to maybe invite, if someone wants to do a guest post, if they have a specific area of expertise that, maybe they're a member of the group and they want to do a guest post in one of our series, maybe we can, invite them to do a post on their topic. So, I mean, there are a lot of options for like getting the word out there. I think it's nice though to have like a good, I guess one of our goals is to get information out there to the ambassadors and to the broader community about this topic. So
So we could ask people in the survey if they want to be an ambassador for their field in terms of the commentator structure.
Well, there's one application for the badge list.
For that?
Oh, for the badge.
One application for the badge list, right?
Yeah.
So I think back when I was filling out the questionnaire to participate in the ambassadors program, one of the ways I envisioned this is even if we get this big survey going on a couple of fields, by the time our time with the ambassador program is done, the hope is it snowballs and it's sort of a living ecosystem where we keep receiving feedback on various fields, various data standards, and so on, and this keeps getting updated, and sort of the platform. Maybe a little bit into the future, that might be really beneficial is if we had some bio-equivalent of the IEEE standards that electrical engineers have. I don't know if people are familiar. Essentially, they receive feedback from the broader community, decide on for example, standards for a given port or a cable and so on, and then various companies go out and manufacture ports to that specification. But the good news is because these standards are agreed upon, it doesn't matter whether you buy a cable from, for example, Samsung versus Anchor or what have you. They are all supposed to follow a certain standard. Therefore, electronics has been talking to each other quite beautifully, seamlessly, and so on and so forth. And hopefully we can get enough excitement generated that over a period of time we have something kind of similar for reporting biological data as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
I guess once we start getting feedback, we can I'd probably leave that up to Bhavik in terms of how he'd want to set that up, but it would be like, I guess if we got feedback, we'd sort of incorporate it into or anything like for this, you would think of like a set of best practices, or what does that look like?
Right. So obviously we probably can only at most propose a set of best practices, but an ideal outcome would be if journals sort of co-opted it and be like, okay, this is what our expectation is going forward for a period of time, and that way, sort of, despite it being just a suggested guideline, if the journals are expecting data in a certain format, then researchers are encouraged to make sure that their data is in a compatible format, and that way make life easier for the entire community. And because it's a living, breathing ecosystem where the guidelines keep getting updated as a function of time, then there is no real disincentive in terms of journals subscribing to the guidelines, because in case any of the requirements are onerous, within a short period of time, they get updated, the guidelines get updated, and then they're back to, something that's preferred by everybody. So the mistakes will be made, even despite the fact that we are collecting feedback from as broad a community as possible. There will be blind spots that we will have. People might think they would like data in certain format, and then turns out that that's not really, user friendly, and so on and so forth. But the good news is if it's a living ecosystem, then there is an opportunity for error correction and so on.
Yeah, the only Red I see is because it's like a really long-lasting project, and we only have 9 months left on our ambassadorship. There needs to be some follow-up.
Right, right, right. That is absolutely spot on, and therefore, if we could loop for at least one specific case where we collect feedback and we have a final year of the end blog post about one topic where we get feedback, and so we finish the loop and sort of show it for n equals 1, and then presumably generations to come after us can keep working on different fields and so on, and sort of take it forward.
Yeah.
But that's why I'm kind of limiting myself to focusing on just 2 or 3 fields during our year, preferably finishing one off rather than even stretching out 2 or 3. But the idea is
we shouldn't do like 10% of all fields, but
right.
Yeah.
Right, and the idea is if we finish one full circle, then there's a pathway, a template for people in different fields to follow, and hopefully the barrier to entry is a little bit lower if there's a template, I know how to do this, and so on. So
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, some of the things that we get in terms of feedback are going to be specific to certain fields, and some are going to be general. So
right,
I mean, it might make sense just to start with like things that are specific to a certain field, things that are general, and then I don't know about like actually creating a template, like a plugin template, but like something maybe like a set of best practices. Maybe if we later on if we decide we can do the whole get it down to boil it down to like a template style, that might be something to pursue later, because that might take a little bit more effort to actually get that.
Right.
So I like the idea, and let's keep going. Let's keep the conversation going on that as well. And yeah. So the third issue we wanted to talk about were the badges, and Huajin mentioned about badges. Actually, it's funny because we have in the Open Worm Foundation, we actually have a badge for blogging. Actually, the badge list also has a badge for blogging. Like, they issue it if you can demonstrate that you can put together a blog post and publish it. So, like, we have you step through. Yeah. So I mean, and people earn it, and so I think you're all familiar with the badges. I've mentioned it in previous meetings. But one of the things you have to consider about this is what are the skills that can be imparted in a small size lesson. So that's, I think, probably the hardest thing to sort of get to have an effective badge. So you need to have some sort of niche skill that we want to impart to people, or to reward them for doing something. And then, like, it gives them a competency, but it also motivates them to do something for the initiative. So, I don't know, like, maybe, I don't know what people are thinking in terms of what might make a good badge topic. But in the agenda, I have a couple of links here. These are badges, and these are really involved badges, but these are sort of things that I've created in previous work with badges. And these are something called literature mining. So this allows, if you walk through these badges, you can do things like engage with the literature to find, data and references, things like that. So it imparts a set of skills, research skills to people. And it's a bit involved, but basically, if you browse through those, you'll see that how the structure of the badge is set up. So you have like a single, you have single tasks that people will do, and you might say, let's try to work with some set of papers. Let's find where they keep their data. And then it's something that might seem simple, but it's actually you're just kind of having them do something in a demonstrable way. So like, okay, go to this paper and find the data set for this paper. And, you'll go, when you make the badge, you'll look at the paper that you assign and see that the data is easily available. And the idea is for them to actually go through the paper, find out how to get data for a paper, and then implement or demonstrate that they can actually access it. And then you do that for different little things that you want to teach them. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is like in the case of like blogging, where you give them a badge that's maybe just write a blog post. Let's go through a couple of steps on how to write a blog post, demonstrate that you can do that, and then put the link of the post in the window here, and then someone verifies that links to a blog post that's of quality, that conforms. Right. And then they get awarded the badge. Mm-hmm. So one thing I'd like to do is like have you think about things that we might issue badges for in our own group. So it could be blogging, it could be something more involved, like some set of skills that we want to teach the community. And then the other thing is like I'd probably take the lead on designing these because I have experience. But what kinds of lessons do we want people to, do we want them to learn lessons? Do we want to teach? Or do we want to motivate people? And that's going to depend. That's going to sort of govern the content of some of these badges. Mm-hmm. There are also badges from other orgs, and I want to point those out. So there actually are open science badges. There's the Foster Open Science, which I think at the beginning of the ambassadors program, that was one of the suggested activities, to go through the Foster Open Science badges and like earn 1 or 2 badges. And they were pretty simple. I can't remember what the names of them were, but like it's very simple stuff. And I don't know if they have anything specifically for data reuse, but if you look that over, you can see kind of where they've created badges and where there might be a niche for more content, because I don't know, I don't think they have anything on data reuse or open data or anything like that. So we might, that might be like a contribution to that area. People aren't able to get any sort of training or anything in that area. And then the Center for Open Science also has badges that are all sort of open science oriented. And the Center for Open Science, they're the people who run the Open Science Framework. If you're familiar with that. Yeah. But they run a whole open science like organization. One of the things they do, of course, is create badges. So does anyone have any thoughts about that?
Can I ask a slightly off-topic question before? I'll come back to the topic, I promise, but just a couple of minutes. Because one of the things that you mentioned during batch creation was that people could, one of the tasks that could be given was to sort of go through the literature, maybe find some specific data set or some specific piece of information, what have you. Has anybody tried to gamify this, not just in terms of earning badges, but for example, the group that's doing secondary sort of data research would gamify this and make it a game where the participants would be looking for certain data sets. There could be lots of redundancy built in, more than n participants. When they agree on a data set, that's considered annotated, actually properly annotated, and then those annotated data sets go into an automated pipeline in terms of doing secondary. Is that something that already happens, or is it?
I don't think people have done that. I mean, at least not on that topic. And like gamification is another approach to like education. So, and it's if it's done well, it's actually pretty effective. But I don't think people have done that in this area at all.
Because in terms of solving protein structures or RNA secondary structures and so on, there are lots of, presumably people already are very, very aware of sort of gamification of those things where, It's sort of a really nice version of open science where game players across the world kind of contribute towards solving structures and so on, and they, by the way, get acknowledged as authors on papers that result from these things and so on. And that's that. I mean, for some of these computationally intensive tasks, that seems that might be a nice approach to. I don't know. I just wanted to know if that was.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Like to identify the good data sets is like takes a lot of effort from a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
Right, and although I'm not in the field, I'm sort of told by friends that that in terms of time, that is the most time intensive thing, because not so much actually writing the code to deal with the data, but just to prep the data in a format that you can feed to the pipeline. That seems to be the most time consuming activity. And I don't know. I acknowledge that this is off topic, and I apologize. But it was just like I was like, whoa, that would be really helpful if somebody were working on something like that.
Yeah, this is a very good discussion, in my opinion. And this is like, I mean, this could use some crowdsourcing type of effort.
Exactly. And
then this is, I mean.
Said you wait for, I don't know, 50 or 100 people to annotate it just in a similar way, and only then do you consider it to be properly annotated. So that way, you control for any biases or mistakes that an individual makes and so forth. And
I think we can think about coming up with a badge for that, but it's how to implement it. That's another.
You should do like have like a how would you. Like, you think about the process of gamifying it, you'd have to have some sort of collaboration, and you'd say, well, you might get people, just kind of give them the idea, first of all, of how to do it, and then go through, like, maybe assembling, maybe you could do it, like, as a badge, but, like, in a way that's sort of competitive, like a game. I don't know if that makes any sense.
So one beautiful thing about this is I assume, and this is an assumption, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I assume that people, at least in some sort of format, acknowledge having earned some of these badges, and it's kind of a reflection of a skill that people have, especially if it's like a workflow skill, right? And so in a similar manner, from a user's perspective, the fact that they could go out there and annotate data off of a literature reference, that's kind of a skill. They get a badge. They can, show prospective labs that they have a skill, whatever. From the perspective of the lab that wants to use this data for secondary research, they have this data ready to be fed to the pipeline, and it's a win-win all around. And even if you don't want to wait for the whole sort of circle to finish, you earned your badge. You've done your job. You earned your badge. And you have the skill. I mean, you have demonstrated that that's a skill that you have, and you can run with it as an end user, one way or the other, irrespective of how long the actual research project takes.
Yeah, I guess with one thing preceding that could be that we have a module or component to sort of what you're looking for in the good data sets, right?
Of course, that absolutely.
I don't know if this is of any use to, I just shared a document here. This is something me and a few other librarians are working on for domain-specific data. It's a note for the curators, for data set curators, for the repositories, what to look for in to qualify depositing in the repository. But then at the same time, I feel like we can adapt documents like this for researchers to sort of think about what they should, what effort they should put in to make their data reusable.
So sorry, Bradley, I hijacked that point in between, but please continue.
Well, no, I like this primer too. It looks good. But I mean, no, I think that's great. I think if we can think of ways like we can use the badges to our needs, and I don't mean to force everyone to make badges and everything, but to think about because that's only one tool for education. We could do things like gamification, although gamification might be a little lengthy in terms of setting it up. But
I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it as a part of our ambassador year, but just generally as an interesting idea. That's all.
That's a very good discussion. I think it's really ideas like that.
But yeah, I mean, I think in general, and I don't have any like solutions right now. I mean, I just wanted to get people thinking about like how would we set up different badges, like what are topics that people think that we might want to address. And, and maybe it's even something like going to a primer like this and say, okay, here's a primer that we could use. Can you identify like some of the file formats? And so this is a good example of a badge here would be where you'd go to this document and you'd have them read through the document and you ask them questions like, can you list a couple of the file formats? Or can you find, one of these file formats online? Or maybe you can find some of these standards, maybe find the website for this standard and tell me something about the standard. Because you can, use different types of input. You can use screenshots or like text. So sometimes they'll answer in text. Sometimes they'll answer maybe like a very simple yes, no. Could be a screenshot. So you just basically get them to interact with the content. And so maybe one thing, you need to do for the badge is to say, we have this content we want people to engage with, but we don't, we want to make sure they understand it and not just like give them a reading and say, here, go read it. And then they read it at a certain level. They forget everything. So, I mean,
also provide them with data sets and ask them to harmonize two data sets for a couple of variables or something.
Yeah.
That sounds great, yeah.
In fact, I think I did that in one of our badges where I gave them a dummy data set, which is just like a couple of variables that were from, and then I said, okay, make a graph. I think it was having them make graphs of different variables and to describe the relationship or something. And so, like, you'd do that. You could say, here's some data, and we'd put it in a repository, like, Google Drive or something. And then they download it, and they could work with it in something like Excel, which everyone can use, and say, this is, what is the relationship? What kind of data do we have? What are the, maybe ask them about, like, how it's described. Maybe give them like a document where, like in papers, often you'll find like a data set where the header of the column of data is pretty cryptic, and then like there's a description in the methods of the paper, but those aren't. If you didn't know that in advance, you'd never know what the variables meant. So it's like, okay, go to this method section, describe this variable to me, something like that, and in very simple terms that they can like submit a very clear answer to that actually gets them to engage with the material.
Yeah, have to make some decisions about variables as well.
Yeah.
Actually, I think I have to go because my daughter is waking up.
Okay, yeah, I think we're probably at the top of the hour, so thanks for attending.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Okay.
And I will get back to you soon with a draft for the survey.
Okay.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Anything else we need to talk about before we go, or?
I think we have plenty of this now. But I would just want to make a comment, like the batch list module you shared. I really like what you have there. I think it's like for the second one, the last three tasks, like locating supplemental data, navigating supplemental files. These can be adapted to make tasks for people to realize like how difficult, like what makes the data reusable.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's probably expanded like that.
Yeah. So please feel free to look through those materials, and if you have any other, if you have comments, if you have materials you want us to look at, please use Discourse. Put it in the Discourse.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Okay. Well, thanks for attending, and probably have another meeting at the end of next month, end of August. So, or if we need to meet sooner, but let's keep in touch on Discourse.
Sounds great.
Yeah,
Okay.
sounds good.
All right.
Have a good day, everybody.
You too.
Yeah, you too.
Later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.